I'm Virginia Ryan, one of the advisors at 401k Plan Professionals. We're going to get started here today. We have an exciting topic, cyber wellness, with our Fidelity contact, David Schneier. Can you go next slide? Perfect. Our team hosts monthly webinars. These are all recorded and posted on our website. Today, we'll be talking about cyber wellness. Like I said, we keep these to about 30 minutes. Today's could go a little longer with Q&A. We've got 18 total webinars scheduled for 2026, so we're only halfway through, but a recorded link will be emailed after this. It will also be saved on our YouTube channel as well as our website. So you can always revisit these at your leisure as well. We do um, we will allow questions today, so I will keep the chat open and we can kind of see how it goes and move through those throughout the presentation or afterward. So as we begin, can you go to the next slide? Perfect. Yeah, today's guest speaker, David, we're so lucky to have him. I would say, as a financial advisor and part of a small business team, I am constantly inundated with cyber security, cyber wellness. I'm sure we're all familiar with the biometrics. So I will go on mute and I will give the floor to David. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm going to repeat a little bit of what you just heard. I'm David Schneier. I'm on Fidelity's customer protection team. Specifically, I lead what we call our client security insights team, which is responsible for engaging with our clients, with so plan sponsors, with participants, with advisors across our platforms through a variety of channels. The one that's featured today is our Cyber Wellness program, which best way to describe it is consider it as if though Fidelity created an internal cybersecurity consultancy that we make available to all plan sponsors and advisors on our platform. Through this, we offer self-assessments. We offer consultation, so we grant access to our subject matter expertise. But the component of cyber wellness that has gained the most traction and continues to grow in popularity, not coincidentally, is our personal security best practice webinars, which I'm actually here to provide you with an overview today. So this is exactly what we would share with plan participants as well. And what's great about the webinars is they're curated in such a way so that you get access to simple, actionable steps that you can take, non-technical, where you can protect yourself absolutely everywhere you might be at risk. And let's be honest, it's a very stressful world we're living in nowadays. Having said that, I'm going to start getting into it. I need to warn all of you who have joined us here today that there's a basic formula that I have always followed when having these discussions, whether it's part of these webinars or when meeting with clients, which is we start off by talking about the threat landscape, during which period of time I will scare you just a little bit, and then transition into explaining to you exactly what steps you can take to make sure that you avoid becoming a cautionary tale. And you're going to hear me use that phrase quite a bit. You want to avoid becoming a cautionary tale. So let's talk about the threat landscape. What's really interesting about what's going on out there nowadays is how the bad actors have pivoted away over the last few years from focusing on what you might think of as old school cybercrime, and that's the technical stuff that nobody likes, right? That's the stuff where, as my wife always jokes with me, that's when her eyes glaze over and I lose her attention, right? So, and those are the things where the bad actors are breaching network security to steal or encrypt data, disrupt platforms, always with an eye towards trying to extort money from the organizations that they're targeting, to where now they're spending so much more of their time, the majority of their time, going after us humans because we continue to be prone to the human condition. It's a lot easier, as it turns out, to steal somebody's money nowadays if you can convince them to move that money off of secure platforms. For example, like what Fidelity offers, to less secure platforms, or even worse, where they're often able to trick people into moving money from their secured accounts to accounts that they themselves, the bad actors, control. And it's not hard if you put just a little thought into why this has been happening. It's not hard to figure it out because you'll very quickly realize there's a tight alignment between this kind of activity and the sudden emergence and the rapid spread of generative AI throughout our lives. When I say rapid spread, if you think about it critically, every supported device you're using, whether it's a mobile device, a tablet, a laptop, every supported web browser that you're using, now all comes shipped with some sort of native generative AI tool built into it. And I apologize for those of you who are slightly more advanced technologically. My 29-year-old son says, Dad, when you use the term generative AI, you sound like a boomer, which, by the way, would be appropriate. I am, in fact, a baby boomer. But it's important that I call out the distinction that we're talking about generative AI in terms of how that's impacting the threat landscape, because AI itself isn't new. AI has been around for decades. Here at Fidelity, we've been using AI in our systems for more than a dozen years, but it's generative AI that's really wreaking havoc. And if you'll allow me a little dramatic terminology there, and you'll recognize exactly where this is impacting your lives. You're getting phishing emails now that are incredibly authentic looking. I have this weird hobby I started more than a quarter century ago where I would collect samples of phishing emails and use that to educate friends and family, and then in a professional sense, to show people these are the characteristics and traits of a phishing email. In the beginning of the summer of 2024, I started getting phishing emails that were impossible to spot. The first one I got, that I knew of, by the way, the first one I got, the only reason I knew for sure I was looking at a fish was that it was sent to me from a financial services firm that I had never interacted with. I'd never gone to their website, never applied for or had an account on their platforms, nothing. And that was the only reason I'm sure what I was looking at. Week's messages. I know all of you are getting those text messages. Your TollPass account is about to be suspended in the fourth quarter of 25. People, the majority of people were getting text messages about how your Amazon account was suspended due to a problem processing your payment. Now, I don't think that everybody shops at Amazon, but I'm willing to bet most of you listening to me today, you shop at Amazon. Those text messages were very effective. We're getting voice calls from people that sound like they live right down the street from us, when in reality, the people behind those calls usually live half a world away and don't even speak English, but they don't need to because they're using these synthetic voice tools that are all over the internet. Very easy to use, very powerful. And again, if you're my age or older, remember what I said. I'm a baby boomer. I will caveat it, though. I am potentially the youngest baby boomer you'll ever meet. I was born late October of the official cutoff year, but it's my generations that's most at risk for this because nobody younger than us answers the phone anymore, right? You let the calls go to voicemail, but we don't have the skills or the instincts, and we might never get there to recognize that we're talking to technology, not people. And the thing that's really stressing me out the most nowadays is what's called quishing or QR code, fraudulent QR codes. Now, this hit very close to home because this has been something I've been concerned about for a while, because I can give you, and I'm going to give you advice on how to potentially identify and handle phishing emails, smishing text messages, phishing voice calls. I have nothing practical that I can offer to you, to anybody, to help you spot a fraudulent QR code, because they all look exactly the same to the naked eye. And by the way, the majority of them are completely safe and authentic. So, but maybe that is a piece of advice. But there would be nothing about them visually that would give you a clue that that's not the right one. But more importantly, unless you've been to the resulting website that it takes you to, you would have no way of knowing, is that the right website? And I'll share, this hit very close to home back in January of this year, because despite the accent, I actually have lived in Raleigh, North Carolina for almost 20 years. Hasn't made a dent in this bad boy. But there was a story that broke about how fraudsters had overlaid authentic QR codes on the parking signs in downtown Raleigh with a fraudulent one that took you to an alternate site other than the one the city actually was using. The only reason they figured it out was somebody who worked for the city scanned the code, didn't recognize the resulting website. They didn't think it was fraudulent. They just thought, oh, did we switch vendors? And they called somebody and they asked that question. And they said, what are you talking about? No. And that's how the city figured it out. And we're going to continue to get all of these things. We're going to continue to get the phishing emails, the smishing messages, the phishing calls, the quishes, for a simple reason. It's working. And it's working to the advantage of the wrong people. I read a report towards the end of last year that it's estimated between 2 and 3% of every one of those ishing campaigns yields in a positive outcome for the bad actors. There are days that over 100 million of those things go out through a variety of campaigns. That's a pretty good day for anybody. If you're in sales, you folks get it. But again, that's always the where I start. I stretch out, make it all like kind of like I'm going to unplug and from the world around me and put my money under a mattress. Don't do that, by the way. That's even worse. But the reality is, with just a little bit of common sense and just a basic plan, you don't ever have to worry about becoming, again, one of those aforementioned cautionary tales. So let's get into it. This is the most practical piece of advice that I could offer to anybody to immediately and dramatically reduce the likelihood that you'll be a victim of an account takeover where somebody's able to figure out how to sign onto your account. Wherever you're using a password on any account that matters or should matter, and I'll explain what that means in a few minutes, always use a unique password. So one password per account. And the reason why this is important is historically, those of us who have been somewhat aware and risk averse, we understood that we shouldn't use simple passwords that were easy to guess. So instead, we created these super long, very complex, impossible to guess passwords, but then we used them everywhere, everywhere. And so what would happen is, sure, your bank account, you put in your username and your very super unique password. And then if that system is compromised, what the bad actors have done historically is once that happens, they swap this information on the dark web and they feed these files with compromised credentials through scripts and they point them at high value target sites. I often equate it to think of it like a digital fire hose, where they're looking to see where else those usernames and passwords match other accounts on other systems. They, for many years, for decades, had a high rate of success because of this. So if you're using a unique password, even if it's a little bit less challenging to guess, you're much less likely to have to worry about having somebody take over your account because one of those accounts was compromised. And if you want a great analogy, I love analogies. You're going to hear a bunch of them today. If you want a great analogy to understand exactly why it's important to use unique passwords, consider if somebody told you, hey, to keep your life simple, everywhere you use a physical lock, your home, your office, your car, safe deposit box, gym locker, vacation home, wherever, why don't you just use one key, just one key that opens all those locks? Nobody in their right mind ever would have thought that was a great idea because if you lose the key, somebody now has access to everything that's of value to you. Nobody would do that, but yet we all use the same passwords everywhere. Now, fortunately, one of the things that's really helping drive this to the fringes of obscurity because compromised credentials are becoming much less of a risk is because of something that you all know about already, which are password managers. Much like I was talking about generative AI being all around us nowadays, just about every supported piece of technology you're using, just about, and not just about every single web browser you're using now comes with some sort of standard password manager. Whereas when you're asked for a username and password, it'll pop up automatically and ask you, do you want to use whatever you stored on the device or in the web browser? And if not, if you're creating a new account, it'll suggest a really complicated, very, very difficult sort of password and ask you if you want to use that. And because of that, we're seeing the threat of compromised credentials continues to drop to a point now where companies, even like Fidelity, spend less time worrying about that because the rates we historically have always looked for matches of compromised credentials on the dark web to Fidelity accounts, but we got to the point where we would often go months on end without finding a single match, whereas we used to find tens of thousands a month. There are now months where we weren't finding any, so we've pulled back on that, and that's fueled in large part because of password managers. Now, the logical question I always get asked: do you recommend password managers, and if so, which one? We're not allowed to recommend vended products at Fidelity. What I would share with you is that most of you are probably way more likely to benefit from using a dedicated device-based password manager, something that you install on a mobile phone as opposed to something that's built into the browser. There's not horrible stories about how those have been compromised, but those are easier for the bad actors to access. So it is probably a very good idea for you to consider using a password manager on your mobile device and then letting that, and by default, letting that generate the passwords. The only thing I will offer as a caveat is personally, I don't myself use a password manager for one simple reason. You create a pot of gold. If a bad actor perceives or can confirm that somehow you're a high value target, so they suspect, like I have only been with Fidelity 13 years, but people who have been with Fidelity 30 plus years, chances are their 401k account is very healthy. That would present as a potential target for somebody, and so they would try and figure out, is this person using a password manager, and they would try and figure it out how to get access to it. But that's a fringe sort of scenario. In reality, most of you are most likely better off using a password manager than not. And if you're not sure which one to use, I will recommend you do a web search on password managers. Usually the top two, the one that I would recommend, which I can't, but that I would if I was talking to you offline, that's usually one of the first two that comes up. It's a recognized name, so go forth and search. Um, Before I get into the specific details about additional ways to protect your account, I want to make a stump statement for one of the most important strategies I'll share with you today. Anywhere you have an account that you care about or should care about, and I'll explain that literally in a minute, that you should care about, turn on every single account protection feature that's offered on that account. Yeah, sure. Logically, you're thinking where I do my checking, where I have my retirement accounts, my investment accounts, my credit cards. That's logical. I'm going to do that. But what you might not think about are less risky accounts, like maybe where you have an account with your local library, so it's a free public library account, or where you do your weekly grocery shop and you get loyalty points or coupons or whatever, and you sign up there. You should be protecting those as much as your financial accounts, because even for those less risky, less valuable in your mind accounts, if you're providing them with an email address that you use, if you're providing them with a mobile number that you use, those two pieces of data in the wrong hands, in the hands of cyber criminals, of bad actors, that's really useful information. Once they know what mobile number you're using or what email address you're very likely using anywhere, that gives them a major step towards figuring out ways to get to those higher value accounts. So even for those lower risk accounts that you normally wouldn't worry about, turn on every single account protection feature. And here's the simple logic why. Bad actors tend to be kind of lazy. They like to move very quickly. They like to operate in bulk operation. So if they have to jump through extra hoops, if they have to navigate around extra obstacles to try and get to one of your accounts, they're much more likely to skip over you and go to the next person, because there's a lot of low hanging fruit in this space. Just avoid being one of those low hanging fruit. Go back, look at all the accounts that you care about, and make sure that you're turning on every feature. Now let's go back and talk about some of those features. Um, the standard one, and this should be on just about every account that is of value, two-factor authentication. So it's not just a username and password, it's also generally a one-time passcode that you're asked to provide. But there may be other additional challenges, maybe biometric protections, and I'm going to explain the value of those in a second also. But there should be at least a second point of validation that you're required to address in order to gain access to your account. Most Pretty much every financial service firm at this point is requiring that, but I would also suggest be mindful of which accounts you're going to sign on to that don't require two-factor authentication. First, see if they offer it as an optional feature and turn it on. But if they don't, you might want to ask yourself, do you really want to continue doing business with a company that doesn't offer two-factor authentication? Because this is 2026, not 2006. That's a standard sort of thing. You wouldn't want to buy a car that didn't have anti-lock brakes at this point in time, right? Or power windows, if anybody remembers the manual crank thing. But think about it. You're not going to buy cars that aren't using the most advanced safety features. Why would you want to have an account on a platform where they're not using the most advanced features as well? And speaking of biometrics, this is an important distinction to call out. I know that everybody's stressed about artificial intelligence. Maybe I contributed to that a few minutes ago. Everybody's worried about deep fake technology, synthetic voice technology, and we keep reading these scary stories about how your account is much more at risk now because if you're using biometric protections, you shouldn't assume that you're safe. First of all, you should never assume you're completely safe using any account protection feature, because bad actors spend nothing but time and effort and energy trying to figure out how to break all these things. They're not always successful, but they're occasionally successful. So that's not just true about that's true about anything. But this is an important distinction. Biometric protections, wherever they're being offered, continue to be the most effective way to secure an account by a wide margin. Facial recognition, thumbprint, voice recognition. I'm not really sure who's using retina scans. I haven't been able to use that yet, but wherever biometrics are being offered, continue to use them with a higher degree of confidence that you've just greatly reduced the odds you'll ever become one of those cautionary tales. And here's why. there's three different dimensions of authenticating yourself on a system, something that you know, so a username, password, something that you have, and that could be the one-time passcode or some other sort of secondary form of authentication, but something you are, that's biometrics, that's still very, very difficult for the bad actors to be able to defeat. And I'll share with you, at Fidelity, we offer our My Voice solution in the phone channel. That's our biometric protection, where once you're enrolled in that, we're using your natural voice to verify and authenticate you as the rightful account owner. My voice is not the only thing you have to be able to get past in order to be able to conduct business in the phone channel. My voice is the first in a complex sequence of validations. The rest are all behind the scenes. I'm not allowed to give examples of what some of those are. I used to. I got in trouble for doing that. And they're dynamic, so they change every time you call in. So my voice, again, remember, I like analogies. My voice, by passing that, you don't get to the vault in the bank, you get into the lobby of the bank. There are all these extra validations you're required, without you knowing about, that you're required to be able to satisfy before we'll let you do that. And I know that other financial service firms are using similar schemes because we all talk to each other, we all pass notes. There's something called Financial Services Information Sharing and Analytics Center, FSISAC, and we all compare best practices so we could leverage them. I know we're not the only ones using that. So biometrics continue to be very, very effective. And I'll share with you, this is a good trivia fact. Fidelity has still never experienced a single successful fraud event in the phone channel where one of our participants had enrolled in My Voice. When I tell you it's effective, I know here at Fidelity continues to be the most important protection against synthetic voice technology. That's very likely true everywhere else. So turn on biometrics wherever you have them. Um, I'm going to jump around a little bit here because I want to make the most of my time with you folks because I can talk for 2 hours on this, but the folks at 401k plans said I probably shouldn't. So I mentioned before about sharing an email address and a mobile phone number that you're currently using and how that's valuable in the wrong hands. But I also want to give you an important tip to consider. Once a year, kind of like I don't know, not maybe like on Groundhog Day or maybe Groundhog Day, but once a year, you want to have a reminder on your calendar to sign on to all the accounts in your life that you could think of that have any value, and you want to confirm that they have an email address that is attached to an account where you actually read those emails with some consistency, and you want to make sure that where you're asked to provide either a mobile number or a phone number, that the number they have on your account is actually one that you are receiving calls or text messages to. And here's why. I'm an old guy. I'm in my 60s, right? Baby boomer. Keep mentioning that. Just somehow makes me feel younger by throwing myself on the sword of aging. But I have accounts that are older than my children. And when I signed up for those accounts, some of them predate the email accounts that I currently use. When you get to my stage of life, by the way, it's estimated that people in the mid to late 50s and older have more than 2 dozen different email accounts they've used. We don't turn those all off, and a lot of those continue to live well beyond our even remembering they existed. And so you want to go and check and make sure, do I have an email address associated with AOL, which I haven't used in 30 years? Do I want to use the current personal email accounts that I actually read the messages with some consistency? And am I using a phone number that on that account that I actually still have in my life? I'm very fortunate. I've been using the same personal email address and I've had the same mobile phone number for coming up on 30 years each. So I don't worry too much about that, but just the same, consider it like an annual maintenance sort of thing. Take a look and make sure that you provided contact information that's used. And the reason why that's key, by the way, is that's how the company behind those accounts are very likely going to try and inform you and alert you if something's going on with your account. In financial services, I know we definitely use this at Fidelity, but most financial service firms generate what's called real-time alerts. So when transactions of note, we call it a high-risk transaction, but when transactions of note post to your account, they'll send you a text message, they'll send you an email letting you know about it. If they don't have an email address or a mobile phone number that is connected to your current life, they can't do that. And then I should probably always consider using this as my last slide, but this has always been my favorite drop the mic sort of thing when I do live webinars, like in person in the room. I literally take the microphone if I have one and drop it on this one. The best piece of advice I'm going to give you today, far and away, by a wide margin, is very, very simple. Don't click on it. Wherever you can use that logic, do so. Be very liberal, be very aggressive about that. Think about emails that come into your various inboxes. Some of them have attachments, so they have hyperlinks that take you to a website. Does it make sense that there's an attachment on that email? Were you expecting that email? Do you recognize the sender to a high degree of confidence that you're sure, yeah, that's an authentic email? Is it somebody sending you a link that normally would send you a link in the context of your relationship? Does that make sense? Probably not. Don't click on it. You get a text message. Those come with attachments now. They also come with hyperlinks. Is it from a source that you recognize? It's something you were expecting or that you can trust. If not, don't click on it. And here's why that's important. Well over this, they do a study every single year. I've been in cyber for almost 30 years. For the last 20 plus years, there is a study that is published at least once a year that, based on the analytics, will establish that more than 90% of every successful network breach initially began by somebody clicking on something that they shouldn't have, that they should have known better than to click on. It's a human condition, right? That we tend to do these things. And so if you just stick to that one solid four-word piece of advice, don't click on it, you've just taken so much of the heat out of the risk in your life. And you've gotten that much closer to never having to worry about becoming a cautionary tale. Um, so again, this is your tagline for today's entire conversation. If you remember nothing else about my discussion with you today, remember the fast-talking guy with the New York City accent kept saying, "Don't click on it." And by the way, feel free to share that with friends and family, because you'd be surprised how many people don't think before they click. And just by simply making that point, you're much less likely to have to deal with somebody who becomes a cautionary tale. And then this is this advice. I apologize if for some of you this seems like incredibly simplistic, almost condescending in a way. But I'm somebody I was born and raised and spent my first 43 years in and around the New York City area. I spent the last almost 30 years in cybersecurity. I might be the most paranoid person you will have ever met in your life because of that combination. And so me, I don't trust nobody with anything. I don't. I'm very, very cynical about people. I would tell you that paranoia is probably the most effective way to protect yourself in the cybersecurity space. But simply put, if something's too good to be true, almost every single time, to the point where you should just assume this, it is. You can get an Apple iPad for $30 on a website. That's not real, right? If you can get a 35% rate of return on an investment if you just trust us. Come on. I mean, yeah, once in a blue moon you can catch lightning in a jar and get a huge return like that. But I've been in and around financial services and working for a retirement company and investment companies over the balance of my career. A 30+% return on investment consistently provided sounds like more like a Ponzi scheme than anything else. And I'm not saying they always are, but let's be honest, that's a not usually high rate of return. Um, just be very, very liberal about how you think about this. If something's too good to be true, it very likely is. We all inherently have developed instincts over our lives. None of you are children. You're all adults. You've made enough mistakes in your life so that you understand, well, why did I make that mistake? What were the steps that were involved that led to that? And then that's how that informs our instincts. Trust your instincts. If it's too good to be true, it likely is. And I want to share something with you that's a little bit more personal for me than some of the other advice. Be very mindful of the senior citizens in your life, not because of my age, by the way. It's because of experiences I've had. The seniors amongst us are the most at risk for these kind of threats because the bad actors are manipulating them because they're not digitally aware. They're not as hypersensitive to these things. When years ago I stayed with my mom, I was traveling up to New Jersey every week for a project before Fidelity, and I would stay with her. And she maintained this list of charities she had donated to. And it was a fairly extensive list. It was almost 2 dozen. And I asked her what that was because she kept it next to her phone. She goes, "Well, those are organizations I've donated money to this year. They will keep calling me, and I want to make sure that if I've already donated money to them, I don't want to be made a fool of and give money to them again." And I was looking at some of these and I started researching them. The first half a dozen that I looked at, these were almost certainly scam operations. Because remember, you only have to give 10% of whatever you collect under the guise of a charity in order to actually qualify as a charity. The other 90% go towards administrative costs. And she was being targeted because she's a senior citizen, and senior citizens love getting phone calls. They spend a lot of time in isolation. They spend a lot of time sitting in their homes, their houses, their apartments, waiting for somebody to engage with them. And so they're happy to have these conversations. There are these operations out there that recognize that, and they do nothing but hammer them all day long. And in exchange for knowing that somebody will call them periodically, they'll donate $25. A lot of senior citizens are on severely fixed incomes and can't readily afford that. I asked my mother, how much do you give these people? She goes, at least $25. That's $500 a year. She used to have conversations with her about how she was worried about money. And I'm like, you don't have $500 a year to give to these people. So be mindful of the seniors in your life. Try and figure out who they're interacting with and try and develop a keen eye for looking for situations like that. Let's protect everybody, not just ourselves. Also, by the way, protect your children. That's really important. I'm just going to hit on a couple of other points because I want to try and leave some time. I know I was given permission to go a little bit longer today than 30 minutes. So I just want to hit up on a couple of other useful pieces of advice. Um, because this is in the sphere of financial services, I want to provide you with this little nugget. To avoid worrying about exposing yourself where you don't need to, consider having a designated device that you only ever use to perform your financial transactions. And I give this advice and like, what does that mean? I mean that you have a device, you literally only power it up and use it if you're going to do your banking, your investments, pay credit card, whatever bills. You don't use it to browse the internet, you don't use it to read emails, you don't use it for social media. And for the love of God, you never let children, especially teenagers in your life, use this device because that is the gateway to all kinds of horrible things because they click on everything without thinking about it. Use this single isolated device just for those transactions. Now, I always get challenged if I don't remember to offer this part. I'm not wealthy. I'm not going to go buy a second laptop or another tablet for this purpose. You don't have to. At this point, almost everybody has sitting on a shelf somewhere collecting dust, an old tablet or an old laptop that just slowed down to the point where you just didn't want to use it every day. So you upgraded, but you don't know what to do with it. So you let it sit there until you figure it out. That old device, dust it off, plug it in, charge it up, and then every single device pretty much comes with a standard feature where you can restore it to its factory ship state, which basically wipes the hard drive, takes off all the information. And then presto magic, for $0, you now have that dedicated device in your life. And that's what you should use to perform your banking transactions, your investment transactions. Again, you don't use it for anything else because that way you don't ever have to worry about malware or any sort of malware or virus software running on that. Speaking of which, um, everybody should have on their mobile devices, their tablets, and definitely on your personal laptops. I assume through your company you have this already by default, but you should have anti-malware, antivirus software installed on all your devices. Now, this is key because we all think, well, I'm relatively safe. Who's really targeting me? Bad actors aren't looking for you individually. They do these wide screens where they're looking for traffic everywhere and they're looking for useful little tips and pieces of data that will allow them to identify a potential target. So by installing something that's very simple, relatively affordable, you could again put yourself on the list of being a reduced risk of becoming a cautionary tale. So I'm going to share a story about this very quickly to let you know why I think this is really easy and economically feasible. I had somebody in my life had clicked on an attachment in an email, thought to ask me if I thought it was high risk, and I was grateful that they trusted me, that they weren't worried about me lecturing them, because the smartest people in my life are also at risk of these things because they're not cyber like I am. And when I looked at what they had clicked on, I recognized, oh yeah, that's very suspicious. Um, and then they asked, do you think something bad's going to happen? I thought it was unlikely because this person in particular doesn't install financial apps on their mobile device, so they don't have that kind of information. But just as a hedge, I thought, you know what? This is a few years ago. I hadn't thought to do this before because I pretty much only use my work laptop for these things. Did a very quick web search. The first two products that came up were very well known, very recognizable brands. And it turns out they were very affordable. The cool thing is that my preferred brand, again, I cannot recommend one, but if you do a web search for personal antivirus, anti-malware software, I've done this on every browser. I've done it multiple times. It's always the first. It's a sponsored ad, but it's always the first one. It's $50 a year. and unlimited devices. And the cool thing about that particular solution, and most of them are like this, is as it installs, you do not have to configure it. The default settings, right out of the box, so to speak, it doesn't really come in a box anymore, but out of the box are exactly what you want. And you could put it on every device that you care about. And as soon as you do that, you don't have to worry as much about malware or viruses. You don't have to worry about somebody being able to see onto your device because they generally will put what's called a firewall. It'll filter unauthorized traffic, and most of them now also come with with a private virtual private network, but with a personal virtual private network. It's called a VPN. VPNs are encrypted tunnels on it starts on your device and it goes to wherever you're going on the web. Everything that passes through that tunnel is heavily encrypted. So even if a bad actor can see the traffic, they can't read the traffic. And again, it installs right as soon as you download it and click and you pay for it and it downloads. As soon as you open it, it does everything it needs to. Very easy, very, very effective. And in that way, you don't have to worry about most of the threats that are out there. And then the last two quick pieces of advice I want to drop on you, because these are fantastic and they're free. Um, if you haven't already done this in your life, the United States Post Office offers something called informed delivery. Well, they will send you an email with scanned images of every physical piece of mail due to arrive in your mailbox that day. And for any of you who have ever been a victim of somebody intercepting a check or know of somebody who's had a check intercepted, by the way, a lot of the time that's going to be those senior citizens I was talking about earlier. This is a great way to know for sure this is what was supposed to show up in my mailbox, and then you could compare it to what actually showed up in your mailbox. I'll share with you that I had done this years ago. I was getting reimbursement checks from my dental insurance company, my son, who's now 26, married with kids. But at the time he had braces, I was getting reimbursed because I met my deductible. The check stopped coming and I didn't understand that. And when I checked the informed delivery emails, I could see that, in fact, they were supposed to show up in my mailbox. They never did. It allowed me to move quickly to notify the insurance company. They made me whole. I reported it to the post office. I don't know whatever happened there. They won't give you updates typically, but this is free and it's really cool. And then also, if you're out of town and you're worried about is your mailbox filling up, it gives you a fighting chance. And then the last thing, it's a two-parter, and I promise I'll end on this. Um, monitor your credit activity. There are some fantastic free services out there that do a great job of this. And the reason why they're free is if you sign up for them, and I have signed up for these, they're gonna bury you under ads from their sponsors, which is fine because you're still getting the service and the service is really good. That way, if there's a change in your credit score, if a new account is opened up, anything that you should or want to know about, they'll let you know. And there's some great paid services out there also, which are better because they filter out the ads and you can also customize things a little bit more. But even so, don't have to pay for that. Consider one of the free services. They just are very effective and give you a fighting chance to spot if something's going on with your account. But the best way to not have to even worry about credit monitoring is freeze your credit. All three of the major credit bureaus offer an option where you can put a freeze on your credit so that if somebody's trying to pull your credit score as part of opening up a new line of credit, taking out a new account, buying a car, if there's a freeze on the credit on your account, the lender will get that code returned. They'll ask you to unfreeze your account so they can pull your score in order to process the application. So that's why this is great. This is free. All three of them do it slightly differently, but they're all going to have you generate a unique PIN, either a 4 or a 6-digit PIN. Treat those PINs like those are gold, because if you go to unfreeze your credit but you lost the pins, it can take up to 30 days for the credit bureau, the applicable credit bureau to reset your account. And if it's a deal that is only good until until midnight that night or the next night, you're going to lose out on it. So what I recommend you do is maybe write it down on on an old business card. Do not write do not write what it's for, but just write down what the pins are and slide it into somewhere that's not visible to the naked eye and keep them there. And you're going to ask yourself, well, what if somebody steals my wallet? It's a series of numbers. The odds of them figuring out it's to unfreeze your credit and then know what your social security number is and be able to, don't worry about that. So just freeze your credit. And this is another pro tip for your friends and family. Make sure everybody in your life has frozen their credit. So let's go back to the seniors again, right? Make sure that their accounts that their credit profiles are frozen, but even your newborns, your toddlers, your pre-adolescents, your adolescents, your teens. For us, this is fantastic. fantastic at figuring out how to get access to brand new social security numbers. And you might have a baby in your life right now that already has a wrecked credit history because that's how the bad actors work. Put a freeze on even the newborn's account. Just do it. And then remember, don't lose the PIN. All right. Oh, and then also just always remember, fast talking guy from New York City kept saying what to you? Don't click on it. Okay. All right, folks. How we doing time-wise? Any questions?
That was great.
We have just a few more minutes, and I do have a question here. And this is just because I want to pick your brain. What other biometrics could possibly be coming? I know you said the retinal, but between what the airport does with kind of like Clear and Face ID, what else do you think could be coming?
So there's not necessarily newer sorts of technology, but what you're going to continue to see in the space is an evolution of how that is. It's going to become increasingly more required because it's pervasive technology in our lives that we all, I mean, does anybody really not have a mobile phone anymore? They come with the cameras, so that's easy enough to do. And I'll say it again, something that you are, biometrics, continues to be the most challenging thing for the bad actors to work around. So I suspect what we're going to see is that you're going to see a greater dependency on it everywhere. And that's great at the airport, by the way. It freaks me out a little bit myself just because, like, how do they do that? But I will share with you that I know with voice biometrics, I've sat in through a lot of show and tell sessions, and it's incredible how incredibly reliable the technology is. So I'm assuming that's true everywhere. Um, but the other thing also is that biometrics should always be part of a more complex scheme to protect yourself, right? So, like for example, if you're going through, if you're using Clear, or if you go through the touchless TSA pre sort of thing, remember you also need to have that boarding pass that was issued in your name. So it's not just that, you can't just wander into an airport. You have to be connected to an actual itinerary. So there's always additional, if not compensating controls. And be mindful if it's an account that really is valuable to you. I mean, you definitely want to ask yourself, why aren't they using biometrics?
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you for that. I really, really appreciate your time. I've got one more question here. Looks like someone's asking about kind of using that laptop, like you mentioned, to do online banking. And is it sufficient to reset to factory settings and clearing passwords and PINs? So I think what he's getting at maybe is, do you need an updated device or?
Generally, it depends on the age of the device. The factory reset features have improved dramatically over our collective lifetimes. If it's a device from 25 years ago, I'd consider that a little potentially sketchy, or don't the kids call it sketch? I don't know. I always try and sound like I'm a hip guy, but if it's something that's been issued in the last 10 plus years, I don't know of any situation where somebody did a factory reset and it retained sensitive information. So I would consider that to be
Oh,
a relatively
interesting.
safe way. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, that's kind of what the question is referring to, like getting rid of or recycling old electronics. Factory resets are a good
Yeah. And and
tool.
by and by the way, just to address that, and if you're still not convinced, you probably have somebody in your life who could do that for you and then run a validation if you don't feel technically confident that you could do that validation. You
Mm.
you can bring it to a store if you want to, but chances are most of the people in your life that are under the age of 30, that maybe you as well if you're under the age of 30, but under the age of 30 probably have enough of the technical chops to do that for you. But spend an hour, spend whatever the fee is, and have an actual expert if you're worried about that. Take a quick look for you.
Thank you so much. Perfect. All right, we're going to wrap up. I just wanted to remind everybody, please reach out to your advisor at 401k Plan Professionals if you have any questions on this presentation, or if you're a Fidelity client and want to learn more about the other cyber tools that they have available. Um, we are always looking for your feedback, plan sponsors, as well as participants. So please reach out with any questions or comments. David, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. This was recorded, as you all know, it'll go on our website. Looking ahead, we have several webinars left for this year, lots of different topics related to the participant experience, also financial topics. And then for plan participants and plan sponsors, again, we have some more coming this summer and fall. You can register for those on our website or by using the QR code. Thanks again, David. Really, really appreciate your time. We look forward to partnering more with Fidelity too. So thank
Well,
you.
thanks for the opportunity to meet with everybody. Everybody have a great rest